Hello there, this is Dr. DeAndrea Matthews. I am preparing for my webinar that is just about to get started. All right. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. DeAndrea Matthews. I am the president and founder of Clear Alden Publications. Thank you for joining me today for the webinar on the myths and misconceptions around writer's block. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the presentation for those of you who are watching via the webinar. I am also going to share it to our Clear Alden Publications page on Facebook. So we're going to go ahead and take care of that. Except we've got to manage the pop-ups. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put this on the Clear Alden Publications page, and then we will be ready to get into our presentation today. So thank you for those of you who are being so patient as all of this comes together. So if you have any questions before we get started, I want you to go ahead and drop those in the comment box so that as we are preparing to start the official presentation, I can go ahead and check out your questions, find out what you want to know as far as our presentation today. All right, we are all set to get started. Hello, Aisha. Thank you for joining. Aisha is one of our newest authors with Clear Alden Publications. She is a brand new first-time author, and she is a part of the Overcomers Anthology. So I'm going to see if I can get her booked soon to come on live stream with Clear Alden Publications and talk about the process, and also talk a little bit about her book chapter so we can help to promote that. All right, so today's topic is writer's block, myths and misconceptions. So I'm going to get right into the presentation so we have plenty of time for your questions at the end. A little bit about me. So, each time I share on the webinar, I always try and share something different, a different aspect of myself about the writing and publishing process. So today's little known tidbit is I won my very first writing contest when I was in fifth grade. So I had a trophy that stayed on my mantle for the longest time. It was my very first trophy, and it was up there with all my kids, swarm of trophies. But I won my very first writing contest in fifth grade. So writing has for a very long time been a part of my life. Even before I became a published author, I was holding creative writing workshops, and over the last decade, I've literally taught hundreds of students about writing specifically, but also creative writing. So it was a part of the work that I did in our high school outreach programs. I taught writing when it came to ACT, SAT test preparation. So lots of writing workshops over the last decade. But I officially became an author in 2013. I launched my publishing company, Clear Alden Publications, in 2017. And for myself, right now, I am the author of 6 books, 5 book chapters, and 2 academic journal articles. Aside from that, as a hybrid publisher, I have published I think it is 13 authors, and 3 are in the queue. So by the end of 2020, I would have published 16 authors, all of whom are nonfiction first-time authors. So that's a little bit about me. I want to make sure that I have the right audience. Hi, Mia. Thanks for joining. So I want to just kind of go through a couple things to make sure that you are in the right place. So today's webinar is for anyone who has ever gotten stuck on a writing project, anyone who has a desire to write a book and maybe don't know where to start, and anyone who's currently writing a book, because writer's block is something that we hear a lot of times. So hopefully today, with the information that I share, I'll be able to let everyone know what writer's block is, if it's true, if it's not true, what are some things we can do to avoid writer's block? So what are you going to learn with the presentation today? The first thing you're going to learn is what writer's block is. The next thing that you're going to learn are the top myths around writer's block. And I'm also going to look at why the misconception even exists around writer's block. And then ultimately, how do you avoid writer's block to move forward in your current work in progress, whatever that may be. So if you are writing a book, or if you are desiring to write a book, go ahead and drop that in the chat box. If you're live on the webinar, if you are following on Facebook Live or Instagram Live, then I'll go ahead and I'll follow up to your questions and or comments once the webinar is done. All right. So if you want to catch the replay, of course, the replay will be available. I'll share that link on our social media channels. So what is writer's block? Writer's block can be defined as the inability to produce or continue a writing project. So whatever the writing project is that you're working on, it's typically referred to as a WIP. So if you are on social media in any writers communities, any writers groups, you might see WIP, which stands for work in progress. So if you've ever been stuck on a work in progress, you might think it's writer's block. We'll get to that in a minute. But writer's block gains power when the person actually believes that writer's block is what they suffer from, instead of diagnosing what I refer to as the true cause of what's keeping you from making progress on what you're working on, whether it's a manuscript, whether it's a poem, whether it's whatever you might be working on. So there are some common causes of writer's block. The first common cause is fear. Now, fear could be fear of success. It could be fear of failure. It could be lots of different types of fears, but you want to find out if it's fear that's really keeping you from moving forward. The next one is perfectionism. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but I am a recovering perfectionist, and that means that, typically you go over it a million times yourself. You want to make sure that the information is just right before you continue. And again, a lot of times it keeps you from moving forward. So perfectionism is another common cause of writer's block. Thanks for joining, Shar. I see you over there. All right. And then the final one is lack of structure or organization. So that's really what I'm going to focus on sharing with you: how to provide the structure, how to provide the organization, so that you make sure you're continuing on that work in progress and you can get it done in a fairly decent amount of time. We'll talk about all of those things. So myth number one when it comes to writer's block is conflicting priorities. Now, conflicting priorities, I say, is a myth because there are some things that you can do specifically to get over this hurdle. So time management is the first thing that you have to look at. If you are conflicted about, well, I don't have enough time, it's not enough hours in the day, if you said any of those things, then we want to look at time management. And that means that you want to make sure that you are adequately using the time that you have, that you are prioritizing the things that are important to you. If writing is important to you, then is it scheduled? If it's not scheduled, if everything else in your day is scheduled, your lunch hour, going to pick the kids up, going to the dentist, or whatever it is, if everything else in your life is scheduled, then why not schedule writing time and stick to that? The next point says willpower versus won't power. So willpower versus won't power refers to, a lot of times we talk about willpower. Willpower, of course, being the desire to do something and to move forward. But there's also this quote unquote won't power. And the won't power, particularly when you aren't feeling like it, you don't really want to, you're tired, the bed is calling, you're trying to, snuggle up with McPillow and McBlanky. So you want to be able to say no to the won't power and yes to the willpower. So willpower just means I have goals. There's something that I'm desiring to do. And just like if you have a toothache, you really don't want to get out the bed in the middle of the night because you got toothache. But guess what? That pain isn't going anywhere. So you got to get up, get some oral gel, or get something to take care of the pain. We should be just as dedicated and have the willpower to push forward and to push through, even if it's just 15 minutes. Now, we waste 15 minutes on social media easily. And I say waste because a lot of times when we're on social media, most of us are not doing marketing. Most of us are not doing intentional activities around social media. We're just trying to see what's going on, or just wasting time because we're trying to, debrief or just relax from a long day or things of that nature. So you want to make sure that you're very intentional about how you're spending your time and how you are prioritizing writing if this is something that you want to do, which leads us into the next point, which is writers write. If you are a writer, then writers write. So that's what we need to be doing. So structure and organization is really a key function if you're going to write and be successful in avoiding writer's block altogether. So structure and organization allows you to not only show up as a writer, but to do the work and to be productive in the work that you're doing. So three things that structure and organization allows. Brainstorming is the first thing. So, with all of our writing clients, I go through this brainstorming exercise. And if you follow our YouTube channel, I'll be posting more of those videos. But the brainstorming exercise can be used in multiple ways to get you to kind of do a brain dump, get everything out of your head and onto the paper or onto the computer so that now it can be organized and put into some type of matter that makes sense so that you can begin to move forward from there. So, outside of brainstorming is outlining. Now, outlining really helps when you are stuck because you could always refer back to the outline to say, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be talking about next, or this is another part that I can go ahead and jump forward and work on because, yep, I know exactly what I want to write. I know exactly what I want to do as it relates to this particular part of the story. So sometimes, even going back to being that perfectionist, we want to move forward in chronological order. And guess what? How our mind works isn't always in chronological order. You could show up in a work in progress in chapter 9 and still not be finished with chapter 1. So allow yourself the flexibility to be able to move around, write about things that are on your mind, write about things that you're inspired to write about at that moment, and not worry about being stuck in, chronological order. So when it comes to that structure and organization, yes, I'm a firm believer that structure is needed as you're writing your book. I believe that organization is needed, but that structure doesn't lock you into a specific timeline or a specific order in which you have to complete that work in progress that you're working on. And then that final point under myth number 1, conflicting priorities, as we're looking at writer's right and how structure and organization can help you, stick to the plan. If you have outlined everything, if you've brainstormed and you did that brain dump, and you know exactly what you want to write about, you know who your niche audience is, you know who that ideal reader is, then stick to the plan. Yes, allowing flexibility is a tremendous help. You're right, Shar. Thanks for sharing that. So stick to the plan. If you have a plan, then let's work that plan. Myth number 2, when it comes to writer's block, I need inspiration. I need to be inspired to write. I sit there and I'm just not inspired. And guess what? A lot of times, like I said, we've had a long day. If you are a mom or a wife, you have other things going on. If you have a spouse or you have other priorities, even in caring for family members, a lot of us have caregiving responsibilities. You may not feel like it in the moment that you have 15 minutes or a half hour free where you can sit down and write. But again, writer's right. You want to be able to refer to that outline, refer to those notes, be able to pick up right where you left off and produce something in the time frame that you've allowed yourself. And inspiration isn't always a barrier. Yes, inspiration is needed, especially if you're deciding what you want to write about, really the part of your life, if you're doing nonfiction, that you want to share, the part of your expertise that you are putting on paper. Definitely, for that part of it, you want to be inspired, but you don't have to have that inspiration continuously on flow every time you sit down to work on your work in progress. So if the goal is to become an author, then you have to begin to view your writing as a part of your career. And just like you show up every day to your job, you want to show up to write on the days that you have scheduled. Another thing when it comes to needing inspiration, because I've heard people say, well, my characters just aren't talking to me. So if your characters are not talking to you, and this is true whether it's a fiction story or a nonfiction story. In a nonfiction story, you may be the main character. So let's take, for example, you're writing a memoir and you are the main character, and your character, you, are not talking to you in that memoir that you're writing. If your characters are not talking to you, whether it is a fiction or nonfiction book, ask questions. When you ask questions, then that gets the dialogue started. So think of the characters as you would think of your children. And a lot of time as authors, we think of our books as our babies. Well, think of the characters as your children as well. And what happens when you want to know something as a parent, you ask. And typically it's not just yes or no questions, because they'll sit there and nod their heads or, just give you the real blunt answer. But we don't want to ask just yes or no questions. We want to dig deeper. And even ask the uncomfortable questions. When you start to ask the uncomfortable questions, it's like flipping a switch on, and then you get the information that authors and readers really want to know. You would inspire yourself just by asking the right questions, because now there are different things that have come to mind. There are different things that have come to the surface, different things that have come forward in the story itself that you can now expound upon. And again, whether it's 15 minutes, 30 minutes, or 60 minutes that you're sitting down to write, you now have additional information that you can explore to continue that dialogue. So, the other thing when it comes to needing inspiration, sometimes we have this inner voice that tells us, well, you're not really a writer. I don't know why you're doing this. You should be doing something else with your time. So, if you have that inner voice that has ever told you, you know what, writing really ain't your thing, don't listen. Don't listen to that inner voice telling you that writing is not your thing. Hey, Dr. Rice, thanks for joining. All right, so don't listen to that inner voice that tells you that writing is not your thing. If the goal is to produce a book and you don't want to write, guess what? That's why they have ghostwriters. So if the end goal is to produce a book, great. That doesn't always mean that you have to write that book. So if you really don't want to write and you discover that as a part of this process, then maybe you need to look at hiring a ghostwriter, which is okay. It's still your work. The ghostwriter comes along, and I'll have to do another live stream on ghostwriting, but they come along, they learn your diction, they learn how you use words, they pay attention to all of that, and they produce your story. So that's what ghostwriters are for. So everybody's not a writer. But everybody does have a story to tell. So whether you're doing the writing yourself or whether it is somebody else who's doing the writing for you as a ghostwriter, there is more than one way to produce the end result of having a great book. Misconceptions. Why is there this misconception around writer's block? Well, discipline is required in order to be a successful writer. Success is measured by the ability to reach a desired goal. But if that desired goal has not been identified, then you don't have a target by which to measure your progress. So that is what causes us to either not get started or not continue on what we're working on, because we don't have anything to measure it with. We don't really know if we're on our way to meeting our goal, if we're halfway to meeting our goal. You know, when you see a goal, when you identify a goal, have you ever seen, like in the school, if they're raising money and now they have this thermometer and it keeps going up and it's almost at the goal? You get excited when you're almost at the goal. Well, if you haven't even identified a goal, then how do you know how close you are to completing it? And that's why that structure is so important when it comes to writers and producing that work in progress. So discipline is required, and you also have to identify your goals. You should know whether you want to write just a short fiction novel or whether you're writing a full-length fiction novel. You should know what those word counts are. That's all a part of the research. Writing is the easy part sometimes because you sit down and you write, but there is a level of research and, like I said, organization that's required in order to produce the final product. The other thing I'll talk about as we look at misconceptions around writer's block, like I mentioned earlier, fear of success and fear of failure are real, but it should not be misdiagnosed as writer's block. A lot of times we'll say I have writer's block when it's really, I'm a little afraid of finishing this because then I will have these additional expectations. Now everybody's going to know I'm an author. Now everyone's going to expect blah, 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 whatever that inner dialogue is that you're having with yourself. So fear of success and fear of failure are real, but don't misdiagnose it as writer's block. So do some self-reflection. Self-reflection is needed to determine the true root or the true cause of why you aren't able to move forward in your work in progress. The other thing that we'll talk about as it relates to misconceptions is a lack of productivity. So a lack of productivity could also be a lack of discipline, but it's commonly referred to as, quote unquote, running out of time. So I'll just remind you, we each have the same 24 hours in a day. We each have 168 hours in a week, but there are some time stealers and time wasters that can come along and kind of reduce the amount of time that you have to accomplish your identified goals. So you'll want to identify what those time stealers are. You'll want to identify what those time wasters are. And like I said, I'm not using social media as a crutch, but a lot of times we do waste time on social media and we're not using it in a productive manner. If you're using it in a productive manner, then that's great. Set aside 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the afternoon, 10 minutes in the evening to make your updates, to post your graphics that promote your book or whatever it is that you're working on. But recognize that those 10 minutes should not turn into an hour, and now you've wasted an hour when you could have set aside, again, that 30 minutes for working on your actual book project. And then the final thing I'll talk about, and I'm looking forward to doing again another live stream on this in particular, monitoring your writing environment. The writer's environment is so very important. When it comes to the writer's environment, I'll use myself as an example because I have an office. My office has been here since I moved in this house. I love having an office at home as well as in the office, when I go to work. But the problem was, I have a small desk and my desk kind of gets crowded sometimes because I've got all these projects I'm working on and all these ideas and notebooks. And I don't know about anybody else, but, I have a ton of notebooks, a ton of journals, and I love taking notes. So I have all these things on my desk and I really needed to clear my desk off so that when I sat down, I wouldn't be looking at all this stuff that's calling my name. I'd have my computer or my writing utensils and I can get straight to work. So you want to make sure that you look at your writing environment as that final tip to avoid writer's block. And the writer's environment is not just the desk, even though that's the example that I used, but it's also, again, what are the noises that are around you? Do you need to have some music playing when you're writing? What type of music should be playing? Do you respond to one type of music better than another type of music? What else is going on? Are people running back and forth? Are the kids playing? Are, squirrels at the window outside just scratching at the window, distracting you? What's going on in your writing environment that may be a distraction to keep you from using, again, whatever the time frame is that you've set aside to keep you from using that wisely. So those are just some things to think about around this misconception about writer's block. Again, lots of things are identified as writer's block that really are not writer's block. So this next slide, if you're watching from the webinar or if you're watching on live stream, I'll describe it to you and maybe I'll post it later. Now I want to talk about other tips on how you can avoid writer's block. We've talked about these a little bit already, but I'll introduce one more. So we've talked about brainstorming. Brainstorming really helps you to identify your book's focus. So you can use brainstorming a lot of different ways. You can use brainstorming, like I said, to do a brain dump and narrow down what your book is that you're going to work on right now. What happens a lot of times with the brain dump is you'll have all these great ideas and some of them will get categorized together into one book. Sometimes you'll recognize that you have a whole series that you can develop. So instead of being one book, it's now 3 books. Or you'll see that, okay, I can do this book first, but I've got these 3 books over here that I'll work on next because I have all this information that I want to share with my target audience. So that's the first thing, brainstorming. You want to brainstorm and get it all out. That way you have some great notes to look back on anytime you need some inspiration, anytime you need to be able to push past this place where you feel like you really can't write anything else. The second thing is that book outline. Once you've done that brain dump, once you have brainstormed your topic, you'll want to do an outline. Now, I understand some people like outlines more than others. Some people want to do what's called free writing, and that's fine too. But you should at least develop somewhat of an outline. It doesn't have to be very detailed. My outline might be much more detailed than, say, Mia's outline, but you'll want to make sure that you have an outline to keep you on track because it's very easy to get off track and go down the rabbit hole. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but have you ever read a story or a published book where it starts one place and then kind of veers off to the left and you're sitting there scratching your head like, what just happened? You don't want that to be the case with your book. So develop that book outline and then follow the outline so that you can stay on track. The third thing that I want to talk about is creating visual scenes to help describe difficult parts of the manuscript. And this is actually something that I used in my second fiction book, Almost Doesn't Count. There was a scene in the book where I was describing this It was essentially a bar scene. It was where you play pool. They played pool, and they had other things going on. And I actually had a picture of a pool hall so that I would remember all of the elements and what it looked like, and try to envision those smells and every aspect of it. I had a picture that I would look at as inspiration, and that was that visual scene that helped me to describe that part of the book. So you can use visual scenes to help describe different parts of your story. I posted on our Claire Alden Publications Instagram earlier just a picture of my great grandmother. Again, a picture. There's this saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words. It's literally true. And as writers, we want to maximize that. We want to be able to use pictures to give us those 1,000 words to add to the manuscript and keep it moving so we can get to the end and become a published author. But using those visual scenes really helps. So in the scene here that I'm sharing with the webinar, it's a scene with a woman who is walking in snow, and the woman is wearing high heels. She has bare legs with a short dress on, a big bag that seems to be weighing her down, a broken umbrella, and a little small jacket. So again, lots of things could come out of this scene, but just looking at it, you already know she is ill prepared to handle what's going on around her. So creating a visual scene really gives you a whole lot of information. So if you have something that you're writing about, again, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, you may want to have some scenes as you're developing your progress or process for your outline and other things. Print off some scenes that you can have, or print off some pictures, or look at some old pictures if you are describing a particular scene. And that also helps you to avoid writer's block, because you have the scene in front of you, you know what the setting is, and you can really be more descriptive, because as authors, we are supposed to show and not tell. So you want to show them what's going on, help them to envision that scene, help them to be right there with you and see what you're seeing from that picture by using very descriptive words to talk about what's going on. So that is creating visual scenes to help with difficult parts of the manuscript. So I want to just kind of talk about this next part, because sometimes people will say, well, is all of that really necessary? So I have 3 scenarios to just talk about when we answer the question, is all of that really necessary? It says author X started writing 10 years ago. She only writes occasionally because she hasn't really decided which way the story is going to go. She has a lot of ideas and doesn't like the idea of using an outline. She's more of a free spirit. Sometimes people will come to you and they tell you, I'm a free spirit. I don't want to use the outline. But again, if you're going to avoid writer's block, you'll need to have something in place to let you know how to stay on track. And it could be very simple, 3 bullet points with 3 points underneath each. And that is your very simple outline. It doesn't have to have a full sentences. It could have 3 to 5 words. It could have short phrases to really describe what's next. And that basic outline can keep you on point. And even as a free spirit, it gives you enough flexibility to be able to write whatever it is you want to write, but still stay on track. Author B is next, and it says author B worked with a writing coach to brainstorm her topic, but those notes sit in a notebook at the bottom of her desk drawer. She wants to finish her book, but doesn't have the time with her full-time job and family responsibilities. Well, guess what? We did talk about that also. So sometimes you do have that outline ready, you do have the information to be able to finish the book, but you just don't set aside the time. So prioritizing writing as a career, as you would schedule anything else, would help author B if you find yourself in that situation. You know you want to finish the book, but you have all these other things going on. Guess what I found? I found that even as a busy mom and entrepreneur and full-time employer and everything else that I have going on, I still have time to schedule things, because, my family knows if it's not scheduled, it doesn't exist. But you can build in the time in your schedule to make sure that all of your priorities are taken care of. And then finally, we have author F. Author F also works full-time and has a family, but decided that becoming an author is a goal that he will complete this year. So he decided to use the tips he'd been given and finish the manuscript within 60 days. Now, it is very possible to finish your manuscript in 30, 60, 90 days. It all depends on your goals, how much time you're going to set aside to accomplish it, things of that nature, but very possible to get your book written in a short amount of time. My new motto actually is write fast, publish slow. So that's partially because, the writing part is the easy part, but you want to take into mind the marketing and other things that goes into becoming a published author. And that's something that Claire Alden Publications actually talks about in our 5 pillars of book creation. So regardless of where you are in the process, I've developed 5 steps of the book creation process that kind of moves you from blank page to published author. And those 5 steps, which of course are very intricate and very detailed, but the first one is book production, which includes, moving from that blank page to brainstorming and outlining and writing your first draft. But book production, book marketing is important because even once you get your table of contents, even first when you get that first outline, you'll want to start marketing your book. You'll want to start talking about it. You should start talking about your book as much as 6 months in advance. And people might, ask you, well, when is that book coming out? Are you still working on that book? That might get annoying sometimes, but guess what? It also keeps you accountable. It keeps you accountable so that people know, hey, this is what I'm working on, and this is what I really want you to possibly help me to promote, to share with your networks, to ask questions about. Those are all great ways to get people involved in the writing process and be a part of that marketing campaign. Book design, of course, is important. Book publishing and book distribution. So those are the 5 pillars of book creation for Claire Alden Publications. So that's all that I have as far as talking about writer's block. If you have questions, go ahead and drop the questions in the comments so that I can see your questions. If you're on either of the live streams, I will check those out and respond to those if I can't see them. But if you have questions, go ahead and ask them. But what I encourage you to do, first of all, if you've learned something through talking about the myths and misconceptions of writer's block, go ahead and share this live stream, share this presentation with others who may also be authors, who may be struggling to kind of stay on point, to prioritize their goals, and to get that work in progress finished. But I also want you to subscribe to the Claire Alden Publications YouTube channel. That's where I'm going to be posting a lot of my video coaching sessions, because the coaching for writing I give away for free. I want people to know what to do, how to write, and how to go through the process. So that's all stuff that I'm going to be posting for absolutely free on our YouTube channel. So go ahead and subscribe to the Claire Alden Publications YouTube channel, and then let me know if you have any questions. And again, I'll be checking if you have any questions even after the webinar, the live stream is done. I'll be checking and asking and answering your questions about writing and finishing your manuscript. So I'm looking now. I don't see any questions just yet. All right, Mia says, thank you for this insight. I'll go over the outline. Yes, I feel like I wrote exactly what I think and feel, and everything is not meant to be in a book. True. So you do get a lot of it out, and it's easier to put it all down, and then some of it will come out in the editing process. So editing and writing are 2 separate brain functions, in addition to being 2 separate processes when it comes to writing a book. So don't overthink it in the beginning. If you've already written it, keep writing. The time to go back, review, reflect, and all of that, as far as the editing process, all of that gets taken care of. But just write. That's the important part. Keep writing. So even if you have things that you feel might not be meant to be in the book, it might be very important for someone on the outside looking in to better understand your story. So don't take anything out just yet, but you do want to go back, refer to your outline, and make sure that you're including everything that you should be including for a complete story. Great comment, Mia. Thank you. If anyone else has any comments, or if you have any questions, now's the time to go ahead and drop them in. If I don't see any, then I'm going to go ahead and end the live. All right, I believe a lack of structural organization is where I fall short. So should I make a schedule? Very good question. So Aisha says, she thinks that a lack of structural organization is where she's falling short. Should she make a schedule? Definitely. You already know what hours you're working. If you have X amount of time on the weekend, or if you have time during the morning or during the evening, you know your schedule. So based on your schedule, you want to make sure that you set aside the time to get the project done. And again, set realistic goals. You want to make sure that you're not doing anything that is something that you can't meet. You want to make it as realistic as possible. And a lot of people are familiar with SMART goals, making sure that you have these SMART goals. So You want to schedule it. If it's 15 minutes that you can give up every day, Monday through Friday, then fine. Schedule that 15 minutes. If it is 30 minutes that you can do 3 times a week, then go ahead and schedule that 30 minutes. If you only have time on the weekend, then schedule that time on the weekend. So, whatever that needs to look like for you, yes, make a schedule, stick to the schedule. Make it an appointment like you would going to the doctor, going on a date, anything else. That's an appointment and you want to keep it, because a part of that is also learning how to say yes to yourself. So many times we say yes to other people. We pencil them in on the schedule. We'll drop what we're doing at the last minute if somebody calls and say they need us, but we put ourselves on the back burner. And if writing is a priority for you, if becoming an author is a priority for you, then you want to make sure that you schedule the time and make it a priority. So yes, Aisha, make it a priority and put it on your schedule. And then again, go back and use all of the tips that we talked about today to make sure you're continuing to write. All right. If there are no other questions, thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'll go and subscribe to our Claire Alden Publications YouTube channel. That's CLAIREALDIN, Claire Alden Publications. I look forward to sharing with everyone soon. Thanks for joining.